And now we're going to move on to the next part of our agenda. I'd like to invite Jennifer Lin, our Director of Product Management for Google Cloud Platform, to come on up and talk to us in more detail about the state of the art in cloud security. Please welcome Jennifer. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm thrilled to be here today. This is very exciting to amplify the value of security. The value of security. So thanks, Tarek, for that. It was a great chat. Moving forward, I think we're really seeing that businesses are rapidly modernizing their environment. Urs talked about, we're seeing the pace accelerating here. And that is causing a lot of our enterprise customers to revisit their security strategy. We don't want to slow things down, but we want to make sure that we bring customers along to where we think that the applications are going. And we know that this move into the cloud is really helping organizations to improve their security and risk posture and ask some of those hard questions. We've been working with a lot of our large enterprise customers to kind of make this happen. But for enterprises, the attack surface is very big and getting bigger and bigger. Lots of day zero threats, lots of concerns around insider risk, a lot of data breaches that are very public. So you could have an environment where customers kind of get petrified, or they kind of realize that in order to disrupt their own business, they're going to need to move quickly. We want to simplify a lot of that. And we've worked really hard to deliver sort of comprehensive solutions from the data center itself all the way to the users and the devices. In the area of our cloud platform, Google Cloud Platform, we've really built a secure platform which is really externalizing a lot of what we've learned over the years in terms of keeping developer velocity up, but keeping security and the complexity of it in the platform itself. So we want to introduce a lot of new innovative applications without imposing the burdens of security on the developers. In the area of our own applications, we've really focused on transforming the enterprise with the way that employees can work and collaborate, and that's our G Suite portfolio. A lot of the students in education today are using it, and as they graduate into enterprise, that's the type of collaboration model that they want to see. That also needs to be at the highest levels of security, and we've worked hard to make sure that user data is protected in that environment. And then finally, with billions of users in Chrome and Android, we've worked really hard. Obviously, consumer users can't think about security, but we've worked really hard to make sure that we can secure the endpoints and make access either through the Chrome browser or through any of the Android devices as transparent as possible, so that even like within Google as an employee, we can work from anywhere and make sure that our security posture is at the highest levels. So we believe that Google really is investing in the most modern security infrastructure, all the way from the user to the device to the application and the platform. And obviously that makes us very unique in terms of cloud providers. So we're thrilled to partner with Palo Alto Networks as we define the next phase of security. So I'll go into a little bit more detail in terms of the type of infrastructure Urs kind of alluded to that we have on the back end here. But we really don't rely on a single technology, and we've thought a lot about defense in depth and the layers of security that we need to build. We've been very public about how we design our own chipsets and build our own hardware in the servers. Not only do we design the chipsets themselves, but essentially the data centers, the physical security, everything is built and hardened essentially for a very large-scale global infrastructure. And it starts with a hardware root of trust, which establishes essentially provenance right in the hardware itself, drives a secure boot, verifies the identity of all code and firmware on top, and all the way up into the application layer. And that sort of secure chain of trust is very important to the security model. In terms of the security software supply chain itself, we are, at the end of the day, a company of developers, software developers, so we've also thought very hard about how can we make sure that we introduce new software with trust. We can't assume that there's trust between any different binaries or services, so we authenticate the users of anyone using the code as well as anyone checking in code to the repositories themselves. And we also strongly authenticate the services in the platform themselves. All of the data that is stored in our infrastructure is default encrypted at rest, and we were the first cloud provider to do so. It was something that we were doing before people started talking about it as a capability. And all of our communications are encrypted at the scale of the global infrastructure that was alluded to before. For things like denial of service attacks, because we have a global footprint, we can absorb the largest attacks, and it's always transparent to the user. And that's a capability, once again, hiding the complexity of that is something that's been worked over decades. We have a huge, obviously, security ops team that is basically supporting that platform, but also hundreds of security researchers that are making sure that essentially all these vulnerabilities and the research is baked into the platform, not usually as a separate product, but just part of the platform itself. And in terms of the operations teams, obviously we have a global 24/7, 365 incident response capability that is really driven off a lot of that research and data that comes through the platform. So the way that Google Cloud approaches a lot of these things is, as you can see, pretty unique. We didn't just get into infrastructure as a service. This has been built up over many years. And any application or service that runs in this environment essentially benefits from this secure by design foundation. We've written white papers about this, so if anyone is interested, there's a lot of detail, and we've been very public about how we think about this. But when we think about Google Cloud Platform for our customers, we really are helping our customers accelerate their own core businesses and the development that they're doing. So thinking about how we can keep developer velocity up, but the security posture high, we do things like checking the integrity of the code, as well as the VMs and the containers that sit in that environment. So we've introduced products to essentially make sure we can talk about how we create continuous integration and continuous delivery environments for the development teams. We also have talked a lot about things like binary authorization, where we check the integrity of any code that's checked in and make sure that only trusted code is going into a production environment. We also recently introduced a capability that we call shielded VMs, which really makes sure that you do a secure boot and checks the config integrity of that environment in the virtual machine. So this is, once again, another of the layers in the user space, but kind of rounds out how we help our customers stay more secure. In terms of helping security admins, the ability to manage risk and governance is becoming, as Nikesh talked about, more complex. We have a number of products in this area, from Stackdriver, which is our core cloud monitoring and logging solution, and our Cloud Security Command Center, which you'll hear a little bit more about. This is really geared towards security admins and managing risk and visibility and the alerting for the platform itself. Things like Cloud IAM are things that we introduced for the enterprise users to make sure that we understand who's using what resources, and that's really driven by certain roles that are created in the enterprise. And we've really worked hard to automate a lot of the config and policy, and how do we think about simplifying this around both roles, but also declarative config, so we can drive more levels of automation in the platform. Finally, in terms of protecting sensitive data, as we heard in the panel, it's all about sort of the pace at which real-time data is being served up to different users. And so we've worked really hard, once again, on capabilities for advanced data governance. On the data side, encrypting everything and making sure that we have cloud key management as well as HSMs in the environment. We also were the first cloud provider to use machine learning for sensitive data classification with our data loss and prevention APIs and the capabilities there. And we've also recently talked about things like VPC service controls, which are really geared towards making sure that we create service firewalls and make sure that we're watching for data exfiltration in the platform itself. So that's kind of on the data side, a lot of things that have been differentiating in terms of our platform itself. On the access side, we're thinking a lot about how we use context awareness, and that's often application layer data, to make sure that we can check the integrity of device and users and the context to give access based on usually L7 information. This is basically backed by strong authentication, multi-factor authentication, and a lot of the things that we've been doing with security keys, which within our Google environment we've been using for a long time, since 2010, for every employee. But making sure that essentially we have device trust and all of those factors built in, and yet at the same time the user experience is very simple. So a lot of our enterprise customers are looking at that model of zero trust security and saying, well, how do I move there as my new security architecture? And once again, we're very excited to partner with Palo Alto Networks on that. Already, I think the partnership has been very fruitful in terms of the product teams having these discussions. I just wanted to point out, at our user conference Next in July, we introduced our cloud services platform. And this is really an acknowledgement that, while enterprises are moving very quickly to cloud, for the foreseeable future, many of our enterprise customers are going to have a lot of data in their on-prem environment. So how do we make sure that we can accelerate the transition to cloud, but at the same time create a consistent security model where we provide the right abstraction, so that when a customer moves from a traditional enterprise security model to a cloud-native security model, or anywhere in between, they don't have to have a different operational paradigm. And security is a core proposition of this. As Urs mentioned, we want to move the capabilities of security all the way up into upstream into the development cycle so that we don't push this down into standalone hardware appliances, and it's all part of the software layer, and it can move quickly. So as we think about application modernization, we want CSP, we're using CSP as a vehicle to help enterprises understand how to evolve to a zero trust approach while securing both their existing applications, but also introducing a higher level of security for containers and microservices and the endpoints that are served up over the web and their mobile users anywhere. Things like policy management and Istio, which is an open source project that we introduced over a year ago. It's now past 1.0. These are things that essentially are helping us define a service abstraction layer where we can basically decouple different services and yet harden the key interfaces. This allows us to partner with, not only use our native services, but essentially make sure that we can introduce the most competitive capabilities and work with our ecosystem partners to introduce this new model across infrastructure, services, and users. And this means for the customer much more flexibility and agility without compromising their operations and the efficiencies. So that was a lot. I definitely wanted to thank you for being here today and also bring up the founder and CTO of Palo Alto Networks, Nir Zook, to join me and talk a little bit about how we're working together to expand on the innovative security capabilities. Nir?
Hi. Okay. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Wow, big audience. Thank you. So I'm Nir. I'm the founder of Palo Alto Networks. And what I want to talk to you about today is to explain to you what is our philosophy around securing the cloud and then how that works really well with Google, both securing Google and using Google as part of our infrastructure for securing all of our customers. So Palo Alto Networks is today the largest non-consumer cybersecurity vendor in the world. And we have thousands of customers using us in cloud environments to secure their cloud environment using different technologies, some of which we'll cover today. And when I talk to customers, and again, we have a very big footprint in the public cloud, so I talk to a lot of them. There's one common theme that you hear across a lot of information security teams that are trying to figure out what is it that they're going to do with this move to the cloud, both moving applications to the cloud to consume as SaaS and moving their own internal applications to the public cloud in order to run it on public cloud infrastructure rather than their own infrastructure or a combination of that. And usually it's a multi-cloud hybrid move. And again, the theme that you hear from a lot of these customers is the fear of lack of control. It's on-premise or in first-party data center, when you run your own things in the data center, the information security team, and especially the network security team, always have this point of control called the firewall. And you can't do anything without going through them because they will block it, they will not allow inbound access, they will not allow outbound access unless they have been part of the process and they approved everything and you do exactly what they want to do and so on. And in the public cloud, that's a little bit different. In the public cloud, that control is not unconditional. It's really more about cooperation between the information security team and the development teams in order to achieve that. And you can't be too draconian because then they'll go around you. And of course, you do need to find a way to do what it takes in order to secure the deployments in the public cloud. So there needs to be a little bit more of cooperation between the two organizations. And there are going to be puts and takes. So one conclusion that we've reached, again, after talking to a lot of customers, and I think this is a conclusion that these customers have reached, is that there's not going to be the same level of control in the cloud, whether it's for SaaS applications or for public cloud deployed applications. You're not going to get the same level of control that you have with your own internal on-premise or first-party data centers. And you have to learn to live with that. You can't fight it. Fighting it is not going to help you. It's not an excuse not to move applications to the cloud. It's just something that you have to plan around. And part of that planning means that it's not just about control. It's also about visibility. It's also about knowing what's going on and maybe remediating it after the fact as quickly as possible, rather than trying to control it. It also means that you need to have different ways of deploying things, meaning the deployment of applications in the public cloud is much more rapid than the deployment of applications in first-party data center, which means that security has to be agile and be deployed much quicker and in different ways. And the procurement processes have to be different, and there are many, many differences, all of which I think stem from the agility and the lack of control that you're going to feel when you move to the cloud. Okay, so that's one point that we keep hearing from customers as they move to the public cloud. The other one has to do with the move from buying security technology to buying security outcomes. And what I mean by that is that today, if you look at the way organizations, information security organizations, buy products, it's always to solve a specific problem. So you have a problem with access control, you buy firewalls. And then you have problems with malware on endpoints, you buy antivirus. And you need to control access to URLs, including blocking access to malware URLs, you buy a proxy and you buy a URL filter. And then you need to prevent exploits of vulnerabilities, so you buy an IDS or an IPS. And now you need to do detection and response, so you buy EDR, endpoint detection and response solutions, and potentially other solutions. And very soon, a lot of enterprises find themselves, a lot of organizations find themselves with dozens of different products deployed in the network, 5, 10 different endpoint solutions deployed on every endpoint, and it continues and continues and continues. And we think, and what we're hearing from customers, is that that's because the focus has traditionally been, for the last 20 years, on technology and product rather than outcomes. And what I mean by outcomes, I mean about things like visibility and compliance and all the other things that you can see here on the slides behind me. And when you start focusing on outcomes, the architecture you're going to end up with is probably not going to be an architecture where you have, again, dozens of technologies deployed in the network and 5, 10, sometimes more of different agents deployed on every endpoint. We think that the right architecture there is more an architecture where you deploy one thing in every network, one thing on every endpoint, and then everything else is consumed as a service on top of those that provides the outcome. Now, when you move to the cloud, either to SaaS applications or to the public cloud, you don't usually have the luxury of deploying so many different security solutions. It's just not feasible to be able to deploy so many different technologies to protect SaaS applications. You don't even control the application and/or the infrastructure that it's running on. And deploying dozens of solutions in public cloud networks is probably an improbable task, and not a task you want to undertake. So the move to the public cloud actually is a great incentive, and it dictates a move to a different architecture, an architecture where you don't deploy so many different things, you deploy very, very few things, and everything else gets consumed on top of those things as a service. And with the outcomes here on this slide in mind, in order to, or delivered again as a service. And that's what Palo Alto Networks does. And to do that, you heard a little bit from Nikesh, a big part of it is collecting a lot of data to a central location. And in that central location, data from networks, from endpoints, and from other things, which like SaaS applications and public cloud applications. And using all that data, and using analytics and using other techniques around all that data in order to find the bad things, in order to find things that just don't make sense, attacks, anomalies, and so on, and then responding back to networks, endpoints, and so on with instructions as to how to deal with the attack. And of course, that applies to Google Cloud, the Google Cloud Platform, as well as to G Suite when it comes to securing applications provided by Google or being run on Google's infrastructure. Now, we call that the security operating platform, meaning we call this platform where you have many different sensors, one in every network, one in every endpoint, one looking at your SaaS applications like G Suite, one deployed in the public cloud, and then all the services that run on top of it. We call that the security operating platform. Actually, the services are being delivered on top of the operating platform. Technically, they're not part of the platform itself. And specifically, when it comes to securing Google infrastructure, so either G Suite and/or applications running in the Google Cloud, we use 4 different products. These products are called Redlock, VM Series, Traps, and Aperture. You can hear more about them later on the second floor in the demo stations. But maybe the philosophy behind having these 4 different services/products is that when you look at attacks against the public cloud, you're looking at the same adversaries going after the same applications, or maybe rewritten applications, but essentially the same applications, after the same data that's within those applications, with the same expectations of outcomes, and almost always with the same techniques. So the move to the public cloud doesn't change the adversary, what they're after, and how they do that, which means that you probably need similar technologies to protect the public cloud. We think, for example, there needs to be a network-based control point where you at least reduce the attack surface, meaning you only allow things that should get in and things that should get out of the public cloud, so that when you look for attacks, you only look within the things that you actually need and not with an infinite amount of possibilities. The network control point also has other things that only it can do, for example, looking for command and control connections and a few other things. And then we think you need to run on every endpoint. Specifically in the public cloud, we're talking about either the virtual machines or the containers that you run, because that's where the attacks happen. When you look at network security or in the network, what you see is an approximation of the attack. You see signs of the attack. You don't see the attack itself. The attack itself always happens on the endpoint, and being on the endpoint is essential. So VM Series is our solution for what you would be deploying in the network, in the public cloud, inside your inside every VCP or whatever, and of course it supports virtual and VM environments and container environments, and it gets better all the time. Traps is our endpoint security solution, which you will be deploying on endpoints to secure VMs and or containers. And then Aperture is our solution for securing SaaS applications. In the case of Google, this will be G Suite, all the applications within G Suite. And Redlock is our solution for securing the PaaS applications, the platform applications that you receive from the public cloud provider, things like BigQuery and CloudProc and PubSub and so on, as well as securing the instances themselves, making sure that things are compliant and so on. So this is our solution. All of them work together. Part of it is theory, part of it is true today. Part of our move from our on-premise deployment today for the infrastructure that runs all these applications and provides the services on top of this into the public cloud and into Google Clouds is about scale and about the ability to collect the data from all these different points, again, SaaS, cloud, network, endpoint, and so on, into a central location, and then applying analytics on top of that. So as we announced today, the next version of our specifically infrastructure that runs all of that, which we call the application framework, is going to run in GCP and is going to be able to collect a lot of the data that we're talking about here today, and then a lot of the analytics that today is somewhat limited to network and endpoint together, and then public cloud and SaaS is going to run together. Different things that you can read about here. I'm not going to read the slide for you, but these are the different things that we can do based on all the data that we collect, decide upon actions, and then send those actions back to all these different locations. Okay? Specifically, what I invite you to later come and see upstairs is how we handle compliance, how we handle automated compliance. There are demos of that there. It works really well. This is usually the first thing you'll think about when you move to the public cloud, because security sometimes is viewed as a luxury. We don't think it is. I'm sure you don't think it is, but compliance is a necessity, right? You cannot do anything without being compliant. So you should go up and take a look at how we approach compliance and how we can show compliance, at least in Google Cloud, and imagine taking something like that and then extending it to your entire infrastructure, both on-premise and all the different cloud applications and SaaS applications that you're using. That's what you should expect from us with this announcement today. Okay? So thank you very much.